The council chamber was built for gods. At least that's how it looked from the ground. Towering spires of crystal and obsidian curved into the upper atmosphere, and the room's ceiling, if you could even call it that, was a transparent sheet of hard light that showed the swirling galaxies overhead. Every race in the galaxy had a seat here. Every empire, every federation, every hive, every species except one. Earth's seat was empty. They'd left it untouched for nearly 70 years. Not out of respect, out of fear. Even now, in this supposedly enlightened era, there was an unspoken law among the Council's elite. Do not speak of Earth. The records called it Quarantine Zone 7. No communications, no probes, no visitors, and most certainly, no retrieval missions. The seat bore Earth's old insignia, an ancient brass emblem showing the planet half wrapped in laurels, half engulfed in flames, a warning disguised as diplomacy. Most of the newer council members didn't understand the tension. They'd been born long after the silence. All they knew were whispers, stories, the kind you shared with your enemies when you wanted to make them hesitate. But I remembered. My name's Commander Grail. Human. Last registered member of the Terran Guard, still alive in the inner systems. I didn't sit in Earth's chair. I wasn't even supposed to be in the chamber. I was security detail, an afterthought. But I had the mark. That old Terran tattoo burned into my shoulder. Sine Nomen Victor, without name, victorious. That day started like most others. Cold, sterile, full of lies. The council was arguing about a resource dispute near the Chalet Rim. As usual, the insectoids were threatening to embargo plasma flows if the Canthari didn't reduce their mining lasers. And as always, the Virex delegates slithered around it all, pretending neutrality while trading arms under the table. Then something happened that hadn't happened in decades. Earth's seat blinked. It was subtle, barely noticeable. But I saw it. A flicker of power, a soft hum, the dormant interface reawakening. The room fell silent. One of the younger counselors, a lizard-skinned diplomat from the Orin cluster, chuckled nervously. "Malfunction," he muttered. "Nothing more." But no one laughed, because Earth's tech didn't malfunction. It worked, or it didn't. And if it worked, someone had turned it on. That's when the speaker stone crackled. No one had touched it. No one could have touched it. It was locked to dead protocols. Decommissioned. And yet it spoke, a voice, male, calm, measured, but with something beneath it, something cold. "We gave you 70 years, just 7 words, but they chilled the room like a winter wind. I felt it in my spine. Every damn delegate did. The hologram activated. Not a video, not a recording, a real-time stream. But not from Earth, from somewhere else, somewhere they had never been able to trace. A man appeared, human, or at least that's what he looked like. Gray hair cropped short, eyes like obsidian, no rank, no medals, just a plain black shirt and a stare that made even the insectoids retreat into their shells. "Who speaks?" the Virex delegate hissed. The man didn't respond. Instead, he looked at Earth's empty seat. Then at each of them, slowly. Deliberately. "You forgot why we left," he said. "You forgot what we told you." That's when I knew. It wasn't Earth calling the council. It was Earth warning them. And whatever we'd become in those 70 years of silence, it wasn't human anymore. No one said a word for a full 10 seconds. That's a long time in a room where silence could get you stripped of a star system. The human man, no name, no rank, just stared at them through the stream. His gaze didn't blink, didn't soften. It was like looking into the void of space, ancient, endless, and entirely without forgiveness. The insectoid diplomat broke first. He clicked his mandibles, a sound that translated poorly but reeked of discomfort. This transmission is unauthorized. Earth is in violation of— "Shut up," I said before I even realized it. Loud. Clear. My voice rang across the chamber, every syllable biting. My badge didn't carry weight here, but my blood did. Every being in that room turned toward me. The stream remained open. The man's face never shifted. But I could feel it. The heat behind his eyes. He saw me. Not just physically. He saw me. "You're still breathing, Commander," he said quietly. That rattled me more than it should have. "So are you," I replied. He gave the barest nod. "Then we're both behind schedule." The chamber doors slammed shut without warning. Not physically, digitally. Every escape route, every emergency override, every protocol died in a blink. Locked. Even the damned Virex, with all their backdoor codes, couldn't get out. I could see the panic in their wet, translucent eyes. "You locked the Council," one of the elder delegates said, trying to keep her voice steady. "That's an act of galactic hostility." The man didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just leaned forward, hands folded on a surface we couldn't see. "You're not hostages. You're witnesses." That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't a message. This was a verdict. For decades, the Council had told themselves that Earth simply vanished, that the humans self-destructed in some fit of typical emotional instability. They'd declared Earth quarantined because they were too afraid to admit they didn't know what happened. But now someone from Earth had come back. And not to make peace. Not to reopen talks. He was here to remind them why they had closed the doors in the first place. The man stood up. Behind him, for just a second, I caught a glimpse of something through the window. A planet? A station? No, something else. Mechanical, massive, and alive in a way metal shouldn't be. Then it was gone. "We didn't abandon the galaxy," he said. "We simply refused to serve it." That line sent a chill across the entire floor. And then he began to walk. The feed followed him, smooth, soundless, his voice still clear. "When the Great War ended, you all expected us to kneel, to accept guilt, to disarm, dismantle, integrate. You called us dangerous, said we were too emotional, too aggressive. You wanted to neuter what made us, us." He turned back to the camera. "And we let you think you had." That, right there, that was when they realized the mistake hadn't been abandoning Earth. It had been assuming Earth had abandoned itself. The man's pace never changed, but behind him, machines began to move. Towering shapes of steel and light, weapons without names, engines that bent space with hums instead of roars. You could feel their presence through the feed. I don't know how, but you could. "We left because you didn't understand mercy," he said, "and we knew one day you'd make us prove it." The council chamber erupted. Panic, yelling, accusations, like a dying animal trying to fight its reflection. The Oran delegate screamed something about planetary defense codes. The Virex tried to initiate a subspace protocol, but his console blinked red. The Shalet envoy actually drew a weapon, some kind of plasma fang, before thinking better of it. And I stayed silent, because I'd seen this coming for years. See, the truth is, Earth never needed the galaxy. We didn't spread for power. We spread because we were running, from our own worst instincts, our own failures. And when the war ended, when we finally won against the odds, the Council came not to thank us, but to punish us for being better at war than they ever imagined possible. They tried to pacify us, re-educate us, filter us into productive harmony. We let them. We gave them just enough to feel safe. We walked out of the council chambers with smiles on our faces and knives in our hearts. But we never stopped building, we never stopped planning, and we never forgot. The man returned to center screen, face now cast in the shadow of something huge, something above him that hovered in silence. A weapon, maybe, or a ship, or both. He said just one more sentence. Initiate Protocol Revenant, and the feed cut. No explosion, no death ray, just blackness. But it was worse than any attack. The council chamber lights dimmed, every comm link died, external beacons went silent. The orbiting defense grid outside the station flickered, then spun out of position. Entire fleet paths, hundreds of ships, went dead in the water. The AI that ran this sector, the vaunted SANCTION, vanished. Gone. No errors, no trace. All of it gone in less than 60 seconds. "What did he do?" one of the Orange shouted. "He didn't fire a shot," I murmured. "He disconnected us." Because that was Earth's revenge. Not bombs, not bullets. Silence. The kind that isolates civilizations, that leaves you screaming into the void while the lights go out one by one. Earth hadn't returned to the galaxy. It had decided to erase it. One by one, emergency lights blinked out. No air loss, no fires, just failure. The kind that feels like drowning in the dark. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't just punishment. It was a reminder. We'd mocked Earth's rage, we forgot Earth's patience, and now we were learning Earth's will. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it drowns it. That's what we were in now. Not just quiet, but choked. The oxygen still flowed, but it felt heavier, like we were breathing through dust. The lights were gone, the systems dead, and even the air recycling had defaulted to passive mode. Everything about this station, the most secure diplomatic structure in the galaxy, was now reduced to a coffin, with good seats. Some of the younger diplomats started crying. Others shouted across dead comms, demanding someone take control. But no one could, because no one understood what had just happened. I did. Not because I was smarter, not even because I was human, but because I'd spent half my career listening to whispers about Earth's final project. Something no one ever confirmed. Something buried beneath misinformation, labeled as myth, dismissed as Terran paranoia. Protocol Revenant. They used to say it was just a fail-safe, a doomsday archive or a fallback AI in case Earth got wiped out. Others claimed it was a ghost fleet hiding in dark space, waiting to retaliate. But the most terrifying version, the one I used to hear from old drunk vets who'd fought in the Rim Wars, they called it a reset switch. Not for Earth, for everything else. The longer we sat there, the clearer the message became. Earth wasn't trying to kill us. Death is easy, quick, it makes martyrs. Earth wanted us forgotten, and that scared these high-ranking, thousand-year legacy bearers more than any weapon. "I demand contact with the Archivian relay," snapped the Virex diplomat, his slimy hands trying to reinitiate his console. "We can't be isolated. There are redundancies. Fail-safes." "Not anymore," I said, not bothering to hide the truth in my tone. "You knew this would happen," one of the insectoids hissed, mandibles twitching. "I didn't know," I said, "but I believed it could." That shut a few of them up. Not because they trusted me, hell no, but because that was the first honest answer anyone had given them in years. The elder delegate from the Zektar Confederacy finally stood. Her voice was brittle, but firm. "We must activate the Genesis beacon." That made my gut twist. The Genesis beacon wasn't a defensive protocol. It was a species-wide evacuation code. Something meant to scatter every ship in the region, to flee across the stars like fireflies in the wind. It was designed to prevent coordinated extinction. The fact she invoked it meant only one thing. They were ready to admit we'd already lost. "No," I said, "don't. That's what they want." She turned on me like a predator, even in her brittle old form. "You think this is a game?" "No," I replied. "I think Earth wants you to run, because that makes the hunt easier." There was no argument after that. They felt the truth of it. You don't scare someone like Earth by standing your ground. You scare them when you run. because it means they've already broken your spine. The silence stretched again. A few tried to use localized systems, independent, off-network machines, but one by one they went dark too. Not corrupted, not fried, quietly dead. Like something had whispered to them from across the stars and told them to go to sleep. I looked out the council chamber's panoramic window, one of the few things still working, and that's when I saw it. Far off, past the third orbital ring, a shadow. Not a ship. No lights, no heat signature, just the outline, barely visible against the void. It moved without propulsion. It didn't warp. It slid. Something in my blood turned to ice. I knew that shape. The old archives called it Nemesis Class, a vessel built by Earth in the last days before the Great Silence, rumored to house more AI minds than any planet could regulate, capable of operating for centuries without fuel, crew, or input. But it had never been seen. Only referenced in ghost logs, dismissed, like everything else from Earth's dark years. Until now. I stood and pointed. There, I said, look. They all turned, even the cowards and the cowards who thought they were brave. And when they saw it, they understood. This wasn't diplomacy. This wasn't a mistake. This was judgment. The elder Zekatar delegate sat back down, her old bones finally betraying her. It's watching, she whispered. Yes, I said, and it's listening too. Because Earth didn't want them dead. It wanted them to beg, to admit what they'd done. You don't erase civilizations because they're evil. You erase them because they're liabilities, because they're too stupid to evolve and too proud to admit it. And the worst part? They were right. The Council had betrayed Earth 100 different ways during the wars. We were soldiers when they needed us, cannon fodder, shock troops. But when peace came, suddenly we were too volatile, too irrational, too emotional for leadership. They boxed us out, took our tech, disarmed our fleets, told us to rejoin the community at a responsible pace. And Earth, we nodded, smiled, played along, then we left, and started building something else, something without them. Now that thing was here, and it wasn't alone. I watched the Nemesis class shadow move, not fast, not aggressive, just steady, like it knew nothing could stop it, like it had no doubt. That confidence. It wasn't arrogance, it was history. Because Earth doesn't conquer out of pride. Earth conquers when it's tired of being lied to. Then the chamber lights came back on. Briefly. The hologram returned. Same man. Same face. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood children, not toddlers, no, teenagers, young men and women, all human, wearing black, all standing in silence, calm, measured. You want to terrify a council of galactic overlords? Show them kids who aren't afraid to die. The man spoke. You've seen what silence brings. What happens when you try to cage what you fear? He stepped aside. A young girl, maybe 17, stepped forward. Her voice was sharp, cold. My name is Captain Arlen of the Ghostborn. I was raised on Titan under Blackout Protocol. I have never known another race. I have never read your languages. I was bred for one thing, to finish what my ancestors refused to start. The diplomats tried to interrupt. She ignored them. I am one of 4,000. We are the first generation of sovereign humans, the ones raised without compromise. The man stepped beside her again. You erased our culture, our symbols, our pride. You broke our veterans and shamed our dead. He pointed toward the Nemesis class, now fully visible in orbit. That ship has been waiting 50 years for us to return. Then he smiled. But not a warm one. Not even cruel. It was the kind of smile you see on men who know exactly how this ends. It's time we teach you what it means to lose without war. The feed died again. This time, permanently. But I didn't need to see more, because I finally understood. We were no longer the species Earth belonged to. We were its enemy. The chamber didn't explode in chaos like I expected. No screaming, no panicked declarations, no emergency overrides. They just sat there, frozen. Not from paralysis, not even fear. Something deeper. Something I hadn't seen in the most powerful beings in the galaxy before that moment. Submission. When the screen went dark and Earth's final message cut off, the entire council was stripped bare. Dozens of species, each with their own empires, fleets, and centuries of dominance, reduced to nothing more than husks in ceremonial robes. The children did it. That's what broke them. Not the Nemesis-class warship hovering like a phantom just outside our reach. Not even the reactivation of the Protocol Revenant, which had quietly dismantled every connected AI in known space. It was the girl, 17, born in darkness, raised in silence, never taught diplomacy or mercy or compromise, just clarity, purpose, focus. That was what Earth had become. Not a planet, not a people, a doctrine. I could see it on their faces now. The Council understood what I had been trying to deny even to myself. Earth wasn't back. Earth had evolved without us. For years, we treated them like the unhinged younger sibling of the galaxy. Too aggressive, too emotional. We told ourselves they weren't ready for unity, not because we were afraid, but because we were better. That lie died today. The Charlotte representative, the one who'd drawn a weapon earlier, was the first to speak, voice guttural and shaking. "We must send a delegation, immediately, before the Ghostborn initiate—" "No," I said. "They won't negotiate." His eyes darted toward me, wide and desperate. "You speak as if they're savages," I laughed. "Short, bitter. They're disciplined. That's what you're afraid of. They didn't threaten you. They didn't invade. They didn't scream. They showed you." I stood up, feeling something cold in my gut settle into place. Something I hadn't felt since my last combat mission over Carson 6, when half my squad got atomized and I had to walk the crater with dog tags in both fists. Resolve. "We created this," I said. "We handed Earth every reason to hate us, then congratulated ourselves for pretending they were extinct." The Oran delegate's tongue flicked nervously. "You speak as if they are gods." "No," I said. "They're worse. They're focused humans." You could hear the gulp ripple through the chamber, because every species in that room had fought a human at some point. And none of them liked remembering how hard we fought back, even when we were outnumbered, outgunned, and betrayed by our so-called allies. "You don't erase communications in 60-star systems," I continued, "unless you've been preparing for it since before you left." I turned toward the center console, now dark, but still physically intact. I pulled the emergency override plug from my forearm, an old, forgotten security feature coded in early Terran standard, and slid it into the port. The screen flickered, hesitated, then unlocked. "Wait," the Virex diplomat hissed. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I was already past the point of permission. The screen booted into Legacy Earth Command. No logos, no flash, just one message. Standby. Protocol Grail initiated. Awaiting voice code. I stared at those words like they were my own tombstone. I'd forgotten about that protocol, but Earth hadn't. I leaned in and spoke softly, so the Council wouldn't hear the code itself. Only the emotion. Lucem ex tenebris, veritas ante pacem, light from darkness, truth before peace. The console clicked, and the room locked down again, different this time. Tighter. Personal. One by one, each delegate was separated from the next by retractable hard light shields, segmenting the chamber like glass cells in a zoo. No one could move. No one could speak to each other. Except me. A voice echoed from the console. Not the man from the previous broadcast. This one was different. Older. Rougher. My father's voice. "Grail," it said, static cracking faintly. "If you're hearing this, it means we were right." My throat tightened. My fists clenched. He'd been gone for 30 years. Died, or so I thought, on a classified mission in the Kuiper ruins. But Earth doesn't bury its dead like the rest of the galaxy. It recycles them. "You've seen what the Council became," the voice continued. "How they rot anything they touch. They called us monsters when we won wars they couldn't finish. They erased our heroes and told our children to be ashamed of victory." My hands trembled. "And so we stopped playing human." I couldn't speak, couldn't move. "Your job isn't to bring them to justice," the message said. "Justice is a myth. Your job is to watch, to witness the death of the old world and remember the price." The console went black. For a moment I thought that was it. But then the floor beneath me opened, and a narrow lift rose from the tiles, housing a small device no larger than my palm. A beacon. Not for escape, for targeting. The final piece. I turned around slowly, holding the device. Every delegate stared through their transparent walls, some pleading, others accusing. But all of them knew they weren't in control anymore, and they never were. They'd just been living in the shadow of Earth's patience. I lifted the device, thumb over the ignition pad. "This isn't war," I said quietly. "This is removal." The pad clicked. A low vibration hummed through the station. Nothing exploded, nothing burned, but every relay from here to the nearest black site went dark. One by one, entire data vaults, containing centuries of council history, secrets, trade routes, war protocols, and genetic indexes, were wiped. Not stolen, erased. A blackout not of power, but of memory. And then Earth's final signal came through, just one sentence. "This was mercy. There will not be another." I stood there alone in the center of the deadliest place in the galaxy, and I understood something no one else in that room ever would. Humanity hadn't vanished. It had outgrown the lie of unity. The silence after Earth's last message wasn't peaceful. It was punishment. The delegates sat behind their hard-light barriers like condemned prisoners in a transparent tomb, eyes darting between each other, trying to understand if this was the end or just the beginning of something worse. For once, no one looked at me with authority. They looked at me like I was something else now, like I belonged to the thing they'd tried to forget. And maybe I did. I stood in the center of that hollowed-out chamber, the targeting beacon still warm in my hand, my thoughts bleeding back to Titan, the old black site where I trained before Earth pulled the plug. We were called Echo Men back then. Ghosts of a cause no one wanted to admit had ever existed. We weren't officers. We weren't soldiers. We were witnesses, like my father said. Silent validators of a time when Earth didn't ask permission. They buried us in training facilities under Martian ice sheets, made us memorize forgotten languages, weaponized silence, and taught us how to make a truth feel like a loaded gun. But most of us didn't survive that indoctrination. You had to be angry and calm at the same time, cold enough to wait, furious enough to never forget. Now I stood among the same people who signed away Earth's future and watched it come back for its debt. A low hum vibrated underfoot, not mechanical, atmospheric. The council chamber, buried deep in neutral orbit near Sector 12, had long been thought untouchable. It was where interstellar wars were diffused and new civilizations recognized. A holy ground for diplomacy. Now it was a target, a relic of failed governance. The hard light walls started retracting. Slowly. One by one. Not because anyone inside earned freedom, because Earth wanted to see their faces again. The chalet rose to full height first, chitin still cracked from panic, His voice came out hoarse, like it had been swallowed by sand. "You think this proves Earth is strong?" he rasped at me. "You've just declared war on every system, on the very idea of unity." "No," I said quietly. "Earth didn't declare war." He hissed. "Then what is this?" I looked him in the eye and let it sink in before I answered. "A correction." He staggered back like I'd hit him, and I had, with truth. Because the Council hadn't united the galaxy. They'd homogenized it, diluted cultures until everyone sounded the same, bowed the same, obeyed the same. And they expected humans, volatile, unpredictable, tragically self-aware humans, to just blend into that soup. But Earth never blended. We consumed, we adapted, and we remembered every scar. That's what terrified them now. Not the weapons, not the ghost-born. Memory. The Virex tried to regain composure. "This was a rogue signal, a fragment of extremist cells. It doesn't represent Terran policy. Earth is likely unaware this even happened." "You still don't get it," I said. "That was Earth." He leaned forward, veins pulsing in his translucent skull. "Then you're telling me Earth abandoned the Council, raised children in isolation, built weapons outside of legal star code, and just blacked out a quadrant. For what? Revenge?" I stepped toward him. "Not revenge," I said. "Proof that you never wanted peace, you wanted compliance." He opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. Because deep down, he knew. They all knew. Every one of them had voted to strip Earth of its autonomy after the war, said we were unstable, said we needed oversight. They sent peacekeepers who spied on our children and seized our tech. They set quotas on how many Terrans could work off-world. And Earth smiled through it all. Quiet, obedient, until we vanished. Now we were back, and the galaxy realized what it had done. The Zektar elder finally stood, her joints crackling like old stone. "This cannot stand. There must be dialogue." "Dialogue?" I asked. "You want to talk to children raised to believe your very voices are the disease?" She flinched. "You erased our culture. You censored our art. You told our sons and daughters to hate their own flags. Now you want to hold hands?" "We protected the future," she snapped, brittle and sharp. "No," I said. "You sterilized it." The insectoid diplomat was next. His kind thrived on order and predictability, and this chaos had pushed him into a kind of manic clarity. "You think humans will survive this purge? You've declared yourselves the enemy of everything." I smiled for the first time. Not a friendly smile. Not even a smug one. Just resolved. "We already were your enemy," I said. "We just stopped pretending otherwise." They all looked at each other then, not for comfort, for strategy. Old instincts clawing back to the surface. If there was one thing the Council excelled at, it was survival. "We can contain the blackout," the Oran delegate said. "Isolate the effect, run manual overrides, pull in trusted fleets from the neutral systems." The Virex nodded. "Yes. Start the deception now. Say it was a training exercise gone wrong. Blame a splinter cell. Launch a soft occupation of salt." I stepped between them. "You touch Earth," I said, voice like steel scraping glass, "and you'll never speak again." They paused. Not because of me, because the lights flickered, and something arrived. Not through the doors, not through the vents, just appeared. In the center of the chamber, without noise, without flash, one of the ghost-born children. A boy this time. 14, maybe 15. His face was clean, unreadable, eyes like polished coal. He wore a simple black suit, sleeves marked only by a single silver stripe, Earth's old orbital insignia. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Every sensor in the room triggered simultaneously. Weapons detection, biological anomaly, AI signature, all maxed. Because this boy wasn't just a human. He was augmented in a way none of them understood. and still growing. The delegates instinctively backed up, reaching for weapons they didn't carry. I held up a hand. "Don't," I warned. "That's not a soldier. That's a message." The boy's eyes swept across the room. Then he looked directly at me. He walked forward. Calm. Measured. In his hands, he carried a small cube. Sleek, dark, humming with soft pulses of red light. He offered it to me without speaking. I took it. He didn't wait for thanks. Didn't salute. He just turned and vanished. No shimmer, no teleport. He simply stopped being there. The room was dead quiet again. I held the cube up. It opened with a click. Inside, a single phrase displayed on the hovering interface. You saw them first. Now make them remember. Underneath that, coordinates. Earth, unsealed, broadcasting, open. The Council didn't know what to make of it. But I did. They weren't just bringing Earth back onto the galactic stage. They were inviting a reckoning. And I had just been appointed the last surviving witness to the old world's death, and the birth of something much colder. They didn't speak for a long time, not because they had nothing to say, but because they no longer trusted the sound of their own voices after the boy disappeared. No flash, no distortion, just gone. The only thing left between the Council and total collapse was the quiet hum of the cube now resting in my hand. The light from it pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. Red, calm, threatening in a way that didn't need volume. They all stared at it like it might explode. But it wouldn't. It didn't need to. It already had. "Coordinates," I said aloud, staring at the holographic display floating from the device. "Earth, active transmission. Real-time, the Virex delegate was the first to find his voice again, but it wasn't strength that made him speak. It was panic in a sharp suit. "They want us to come?" he asked, voice strained. "This is a trap. It has to be." "No," I said. "It's worse than a trap." He looked at me like I'd gone insane. Maybe I had. "They're not trying to kill you," I said. "They want you to see what they've become." The Charlotte delegate turned his heavy eyes on me, his exoskeleton chittering as he leaned in. "You expect us to walk into the Predator's den willingly?" "I don't expect anything," I said. "But they do." The air had changed since the boy appeared. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was shame. But not the kind that made people reflect. The kind that turned powerful men into cowards, too smart to fight, but too proud to kneel. I looked around the chamber and realized what I was seeing wasn't a government anymore. It was a gallery of extinction. Every empire here, every ancient race, every post-Enlightenment state. Finished. They just hadn't caught up to it yet. I knew what came next, because I was raised on both sides of the story. Human blood, council collar, and both of them were trying to strangle the other. The Zektar elder finally spoke again, her voice shaky, but coated in the authority of someone who had survived longer than most civilizations. "What happens if we go to Earth?" I turned to face her. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was preparing to die. Maybe for the first time in 1,000 years, she'd realized no amount of legacy could stop someone who didn't care about your pedigree. "You'll see what 70 years of silence looks like," I said. "You'll see what happens when a species doesn't have to explain itself anymore." "And if we don't go?" I let the question hang for a second. Then I pointed to the cube. "You think this is an invitation?" I said. "It's not. It's a countdown." They all looked at each other, really looked. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about survival. The cube pulsed again. A second line of text appeared. Time remaining, 72 standard hours. After that, transmission ends. I felt the breath leave the room again. Not from surprise, from certainty. They weren't bluffing. Earth didn't bluff, not anymore. They gave a window, and if it closed, it wouldn't reopen. Not for centuries, maybe not ever. "You're the key," the insectoid rasped at me. "No," I said, "I'm the message." He slammed a claw on the table. "You were planted here, your bloodline, your very presence was part of this." He wasn't wrong. Earth had left me behind, whether I'd known it or not, as a sleeper, a watcher, a ghost in the system, and I had done my job, without even realizing it. Because that's what made humans dangerous. Not strength, not speed. Persistence. You could wipe out our cities, our libraries, our names. Hell, you could turn Earth to glass. And we'd still find a way to crawl back from the ashes, just to remind you why you should have finished the job. The Zektar elder stood again. "I will go," she said. They all turned. "You can't," the Oran delegate hissed. "That's suicide." "No," she said. "It's history." She looked at me, something strangely calm in her face now. "I remember your father." That shook me. "He stood in this chamber once," she continued. "He wore a council pin and didn't speak the entire session. When the vote came down, whether to quarantine Earth or offer reparations, he didn't even protest." She stared into me like she was measuring guilt. "You know what he did instead?" I shook my head. "He watched," she said. "He watched every one of us raise our hands and strip your species of its name. Then he left the chamber and never came back." She nodded toward the cube. "Now I know why." I swallowed hard. My throat felt like I'd eaten glass. "He knew this day would come," I said. She nodded. "He didn't want to stop it. He wanted to make sure we saw it coming." Silence. Then, one by one, other delegates stood. Not out of courage, not even regret, out of duty, the kind you couldn't run from, even after generations of lying to yourself. "We need a ship," one of them said. "You won't make it far," I warned. "Earth isn't going to allow just anyone to land. They invited you. That doesn't mean they trust you." "Then we bring someone they trust," said the Zektar. All eyes turned to me. Of course, the boy had given me the cube. I wasn't just the message, I was the key. The delegation vessel was an old model, Council Class 7, refitted for deep protocol missions, rarely used. It was slow, quiet, ironically ceremonial for a people who were about to beg for their place at the table again. We launched 36 hours after receiving the cube. The ship was silent during flight. Everyone knew what waited at the other end wasn't a diplomatic meeting. It was a reckoning. No escort fleets, no weapon systems. That was part of the deal. Earth wanted them vulnerable, naked, real. I stood at the command bay, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. Not the scorched, abandoned husk they'd all expected to see someday. Number It was thriving. The atmosphere glowed richer than before. The orbital rings were gone, replaced by seamless metallic lattices that shimmered like liquid steel. I saw no satellites, no beacons, no stations, but I felt watched all the same. It wasn't just technology. It was sentience. As we entered low orbit, the ship halted. Not by our doing, by something outside of our control. A voice came through. Not male, not female, just human. "We have waited long enough. Prepare to disembark." There were no coordinates, no landing bay, just permission. We drifted down like a leaf in windless gravity, and below us the Earth began to open. Not with explosions, not with fanfare, just precision, like it had been waiting for us to knock. We touched down with no landing gear deployed. Earth didn't require mechanical landings anymore. The ground welcomed us, not with ramps or docking clamps, but by simply lowering itself, like a breath being drawn. The soil itself, black and smooth like obsidian glass, parted in a precise geometric pattern, and our vessel sank slowly into what could only be described as a womb of engineered silence. No resistance, no turbulence, just surrender. For most of the delegates, this was their first time setting foot on Earth. For others, it had been centuries. They stood in stunned silence at the entry platform, waiting for something, anything familiar. There was none. No atmosphere pollution, no crumbling ruins, no signs of old governments or history museums clinging to a dying legacy. The land stretched in calculated symmetry, vast fields of white stone and black metal grown like veins across the skin of a reborn planet. There were no cities, no ships, and yet nothing about this place felt empty. The silence was not absence, it was order. I led them down the path. It formed in real time under our feet, smooth and silent, like the planet was studying each step before deciding if we deserved another. No one spoke. Even the ones who spent lifetimes barking orders, decreeing planetary policy, and conducting wars over mineral rights. They knew now that words had lost their weight here. Earth wasn't interested in conversation. Earth wanted them to understand. A mile into the walk, we saw them. Children. Young men and women, maybe 50 of them, standing in symmetrical formation across a wide platform that stretched toward the horizon. Clad in the same black attire the boy on the council station wore, they looked more like statues than soldiers. Not a blink, not a flinch, just calm presence. They didn't carry weapons. They didn't need to. Their posture alone said everything. They weren't guarding anything. They were watching. The delegates slowed as we approached. One of the insectoids made a soft, clicking sound, an old diplomatic reflex meant to signify respect. But none of the children reacted. Until one of them finally stepped forward. A girl, barely older than 16, pale, sharp-featured, eyes so dark they pulled your attention like gravity. "Grail," she said, addressing me directly. "You've delivered them." Her voice was flat, not cold, not warm, just clean, like a blade drawn from water. I nodded. "I have." She looked at the others, but she wasn't looking at their faces. She was looking through them, measuring posture, tone, micro tremors, fear levels. They weren't being greeted, they were being scanned. "Follow," she said. No title, no explanation. She turned and walked. The others fell into step without hesitation, not because they trusted her, but because Earth no longer operated under the illusion of choice. As we followed the girl through the path of reflective black metal, one of the delegates, a young Canthari noble whose family ran 3 supply moons, leaned toward me. "This isn't a meeting," he whispered. "It's a funeral." I didn't answer, because he was right, but he hadn't figured out whose. The structure we approached was like nothing in council records. No walls, no visible supports. It looked like a fold in the fabric of the sky, some massive curvature of transparent and iridescent materials that refracted the sunlight into eerie patterns across the landscape. As we entered, I noticed something strange. There were no signs of recent construction, no scaffolding, no energy signatures, no seams. This place hadn't been built, it had been grown. We stopped in a chamber, vast, circular, and acoustically perfect. A whisper could be heard across a mile in any direction. At the far end, a single figure stood with his back to us. An adult this time, not a child. The man turned slowly, and every pair of lungs in that chamber forgot to breathe. It was the same face from the first transmission on the council station, the one who'd said, "We gave you 70 years." But now, seeing him up close, I realized the truth. He hadn't aged, not a wrinkle, not a crack in his voice, not even a change in gait. Time had passed for the council, but not for him. Earth had found a way to freeze consequence. "Council," he said, and even the air around his words felt heavier. "You've returned." He said it like someone watching an animal crawl back after chewing its own leg off. Not pity, just detached recognition. "You accepted the invitation," he continued. "That's rare, historically." The Charlotte tried to speak, his mandibles clacking. "We came in peace." The man tilted his head. "No," he said. "You came because your power is broken and your control is unraveling. You came because Earth stopped pretending it needed your permission." The Zektar elder tried a different approach. "We admit our mistakes." The man's gaze locked onto her. "You misunderstand. This isn't your story. It never was." He took a few steps forward. His hands were behind his back. Relaxed, not confrontational. That's what made it worse. "The children you see around you," he said, gesturing subtly, "are the first generation born free from galactic conditioning. They were not taught to tolerate corruption. They were not taught to submit to unity. They were taught truth, unfiltered by your consensus." He turned to me then. "And he said, pointing at me, "is the bridge between your dying empire and our rising doctrine." The delegates turned to me again. Not with blame this time, with fear, because they finally understood I wasn't just here to guide them. I was here to record their end. "Earth doesn't want your tribute," the man continued. "We don't want reparations, treaties, or cultural exchange." He paused. "We want distance." That hit harder than any declaration of war, because it meant Earth wasn't here to conquer. It was here to separate, to cut out the infection. "You will leave," he said, "and you will tell your people that Earth is no longer part of your mythology. We are not gods. We are not devils. We are not negotiable." He raised his hand. The walls of the chamber shifted, displaying an array of stars. "This is your galaxy," he said. "We've moved on." The stars twisted, subtly but undeniably. Constellations changed, coordinates realigned, and just like that, Earth wasn't in their space anymore. "We have folded ourselves into a separate dimension of space-time," he said. "One that your mathematics won't explain. One your AI won't predict. You will not find us again." A few of the younger delegates gasped. The Oran delegate stepped forward, desperate. "But trade, communications, there are colonies." "Not anymore," the man said flatly. "We've retrieved them." It took me a second to process that. They'd already extracted every Terran-born citizen from Council-controlled space, without detection, without violence. "Consider this the final message," he said. "Do not follow, do not search, do not pray in our name." He pointed again. "To him," he said, nodding at me, "you owe your final warning. Remember that." Then he turned his back and walked away. Just like that. Done. The girl who had guided us reappeared. "Return to your ship," she said. "You have 13 hours before the rift closes." No threats, no guards, no weapons, just finality. The delegation didn't speak as we left. No arguments, no whispered planning, no diplomatic murmurs. Just footsteps. Some of them stared at the ground as if it would open up and consume them. Others stared at the children standing along the path, as if hoping one of them might change their minds, say something comforting, something human. But the Ghostborn said nothing. They didn't hate us. They didn't need to. We were already dead to them, and in a way, they were right. We walked the same path back to the ship. The blackened soil reshaped itself beneath our steps, correcting every indentation, every disturbance. Like we'd never been there at all. That's how Earth worked now. Not through war, through erasure. When we boarded the vessel, the entry hatch closed on its own. No one gave the order. No one needed to. The ship lifted off like it was pushed by unseen hands, not violently, not even forcefully. Just removed. A rejection so complete it didn't feel like exile. It felt like sterilization. None of us said anything until Earth was just a sphere again, a blue, white, and black marble slowly shrinking in the viewport. The systems were back online, navigation, gravity, comms, all functioning with quiet efficiency. But it felt like being inside a grave. I stood alone near the front, hands clenched on the railing, watching Earth fade. The Zektar elder stepped up beside me. "He never even gave his name," she said. I didn't respond, because I knew why. Names were for beings who wanted to be remembered. He didn't. He wanted the opposite. "They won't listen," she said after a moment. "The other systems, the core fleets, they'll think it's a bluff or a trick or some Terran psyop. You know how they are." I turned toward her. "Then let them come," I said. "Let them knock on the gate Earth welded shut." She nodded slowly, like a person preparing to accept something long overdue. We returned to the central room of the ship, where the rest of the delegates sat, scattered, humbled, broken in ways no political defeat had ever managed to do. These were not conquerors anymore. They were survivors of an extinction-level truth. The Virex diplomat stood up when I entered. "You," he began, finger pointed. "You were planted here. You knew this was coming. You betrayed the Council." I didn't move. "You're right," I said flatly. The air turned brittle. Others shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. "You were warned," I continued. "Decades ago. You thought Earth had been tamed. You made us ashamed of our victories, ashamed of our instincts, ashamed of being human." I took a few slow steps forward, making sure each word hit them like a nail in bone. "You wanted Earth in a cage with a ribbon on it, and when it stopped howling, you thought you'd won." The Virex's face twisted. "You think this is triumph?" "No," I said. "This is balance." The Canthari noble, the youngest of the group, finally spoke. "What will happen now?" "Nothing," I said. "You'll go back. You'll report. You'll lie to your people to preserve order. That's what you do." He looked at me like I'd slapped him, but he didn't deny it. "And then what?" he asked. "When someone tries to reach Earth again?" "They won't find it," I said. "They didn't just fold away the planet. They erased their own coordinates from your physics." They blinked. "The universe isn't missing Earth," I said. "Your galaxy is." That's what people wouldn't understand. This wasn't just a shield or a cloaking field. Earth had fundamentally redefined its relationship with space-time itself. We weren't simply out of sight. We were out of context. The Ghostborn hadn't just been trained to fight. They had been trained to remove humanity from the myth of the stars. And now the rest of the galaxy was left with a hole in its own identity. You think you can ignore something like that? You can't. It festers. It haunts. It reminds. The reports began 3 weeks later. Fleets sent to test Earth's coordinates vanished. No explosions, no wreckage, no signal. They just blinked out. Science teams tried to map gravity distortions where Earth should be. The results came back inconclusive, as if the instruments couldn't agree on reality anymore. By week 6, core world universities had banned discussions on Terran space distortion theory, citing a rise in student suicides. By week 9, an AI in the Virex capital abruptly shut itself down mid-trial, citing philosophical paradoxes incompatible with operational stability. Its last recorded words were, "The absence of Earth implies the presence of something greater." By week 12, the panic began. Entire colonies started erasing Earth from their archives. Terran language, history, culture, deleted voluntarily. Not from malice, from terror. Because the more they remembered Earth, the more it stared back. And it wasn't blinking. I didn't return to the Council. I left the ship at the first neutral port and vanished into the outer rim, where the comms are fuzzy, where old soldiers go when they're done pretending peace was anything but a loaded gun aimed at the past. People say they saw me in a bar on Relic 3, drinking jet black whiskey and talking to myself. Others say I became a smuggler. A few believe I was taken back to Earth by the Ghostborn in the middle of the night. They're all wrong. I stayed in the quiet. Because that's where Earth lives now. In silence. In unspoken fear. In the pause between starship transmissions when the crew thinks they've heard something moving outside the hull. That's the new human legacy. We don't conquer. We don't demand apologies. We don't take revenge. We just disappear. And let the galaxy destroy itself trying to remember what it lost. I write this now not as a soldier, not even as a Terran, but as the last voice that knew what Earth was before it became myth. You want to know what happened to humanity? We got tired of proving ourselves, tired of smiling while being called unstable, tired of dying in your wars, then being told our emotions made us dangerous. We stopped trying to fit your idea of peace, and we built our own. You'll never find us again, but you'll feel us. Every time your comms lag, every time a protocol fails without explanation, every time your child stares into the void and says they've dreamt of black stars and voices that never sleep. We'll be there, not to kill, not to rule, but to remind you. You had your chance. You left our seat empty. Now you get to live with the silence. Forever.